All right, shalom, guys. We're here once again for another Hebrew lesson. We gather every week together to try to learn ancient Hebrew together. And when we're learning ancient Hebrew, we dive into it from different perspectives. So we try to study the origin, what what came before. Oh, great, Adam's here, right as we got started. Good. Let me just wait. Okay, it looks like he's all right. Great. So with ancient Hebrew, what we do study it from different vantage points. One of the important sources of our study is Akkadian, the language of Akkadian, which is a very ancient Semitic language, and it reveals a lot of insights into the origins of Biblical Hebrew, the grammar, rules, and the lexicon, like the etymology of vocabulary and such. So we dive into ancient Hebrew from that perspective. We also consider Arabic and Ethiopian as sister languages that may give some insight into ancient Hebrew. Dead Sea Scrolls has a Hebrew dialects that give some insight. Then we have Paleo-Hebrew literature, fragments outside of the Bible, and Paleo-Hebrew in general gives us some insights. Dead Sea Scrolls Hebrew, like I said, the dialects. There's Samaritan Hebrew. The Hebrew of the Bible has a lot of important information for the rules of how ancient Biblical Hebrew works. So our goal in learning together Biblical Hebrew, but ancient Biblical Hebrew, is trying to understand Hebrew for the entire picture. Not necessarily fluent so that you can speak in any dialect of Hebrew. We're going to try to focus on a single dialect of Hebrew that we're able to speak with each other and read Hebrew. However, as we become fluent in this type of Hebrew, we want to have a greater understanding of where Hebrew came from, because if we know where Hebrew came from and the rules that it comes from, then that can help us better understand the Hebrew that we are reading and speaking today, and that is in the Bible. So that's the overall goal, to understand the etymology of Hebrew way back to the beginning, to understand the original rules of grammar, and to see how they have changed over time, so that we can understand why Hebrew is the way it is in the Bible. And so with that said, I did upload for you guys in the chat a copy of the PDF file that we'll be reading from today. It's called A Grammar of Biblical Hebrew, and this is by Paul Yuan Takamitsu Muraoka. Excuse me, that's two different people. I was reading the title of the PDF file. They're two different people, Paul Yuan and Takamitsu Muraoka. And I highly value Takamitsu's work on Hebrew. He has some great stuff. Actually, before we get started, I'll show you. I have one book. That's okay. I don't need to show you guys. But basically, it's a very cool book that takes the language of Akkadian and shows how each Hebrew word corresponds to the Akkadian word, which words are the same. So that's very cool. It's like a dictionary that compares Hebrew with Akkadian words, and that's amazing to me. So some great insight in that. We'll be using that later on in our studies, but for now, we will not be using that. So, but like I said, eventually we will, because there's so much depth to that. But he was one of the people who did that. I also believe he worked on, I think it was him who did a Septuagint and Septuagint and Hebrew corresponding, where it links the Septuagint words with the Hebrew words. things like that. So that's very fascinating. But anyways, like I said, highly value his work. That's why we're going to be using his grammar. Now, this grammar book actually follows pretty well with Gesenius's grammar. So I would also recommend using Gesenius's grammar and comparing them. Both are helpful in having insight into how Hebrew works. So with that said, let us go to that PDF file. And I'm going to share the screen with you guys. And also for learning Hebrew, some people might find it desirable for us to learn modern Hebrew as well. And that's something we could potentially learn at some point, just so we can communicate with modern Jews. But that is a low tier on our priorities, because the reason we're learning Hebrew is so that we can properly understand the Bible and have a deeper impact to our faith, not because we want to communicate with secular Jews living in Israel. You know, our main purpose is for our faith and understanding scripture properly. That's why we're learning Hebrew, and for translating purposes, so we can translate scripture properly. Because we know scripture has been falsely translated so many times. And so what are we to do? Are we to just deal with it and just be settled and satisfied with the bad that we have? No, we should do our best to try to figure out what the true translation should be. And so that's my goal, and you guys can help me fulfill that goal by learning Hebrew with me together. And then we can use Hebrew together and help reinforce my understanding of Hebrew so that I can start this Bible project translating it. So that's the overall goal. So here is a table of contents. So apparently this originally was a French text, but they translated it from French into English. So that's kind of interesting. Now, they divide it basically into, there's like an introduction, so it gives you the basic idea of Hebrew as a language, like compared to other languages. And then you have what's called orthography and phonetics. This is basically just telling you spelling rules as well as pronunciation, how to say Hebrew words and Hebrew letters, which is kind of what we've been dealing with. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this is they put with this all these vowel markings, which, as we've discussed, the vowel markings are late date and not part of the original language. And so we're going to pretty much ignore the vowel marking content, which means a good chunk of this stuff is just irrelevant to us because it's excessive information on vowel markings when we're not going to be studying vowel markings. So it's like pages and pages and pages of really tedious information about vowel marking rules and the proper vowel markings to use when and where and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's just very gives you a headache thinking about it. Walter says Michael Heiser has some bibliography that he has recommended for learning ancient language grammars such as Hebrew and Greek. So it provides word study and resources for word study and grammars. So that's something people could check out as well, Michael Heiser's stuff. So, and again, with phonetics, all this like vowel marking stuff, it just bogs it down. But then there are some good stuff mixed in between. So it's kind of like a mixed bag. You have to skim through it and pick out the good parts and, chew the meat and spit out the bones type of thing. And there's a lot of bones in this meat. So part 2 is morphology, which is basically like I guess it's like how to spell words and stuff like that. So but so we have the definite article, the pronoun, the verb. Now we say the verb for last because the verb is the most complicated aspect of Hebrew, or in languages in general. Verbs are very complicated. So we'll be dealing with verbs eventually. It's something very stressful and hard to fully grasp how verbs work in languages. So we'll be learning the easier stuff first, and then eventually we'll be getting to those verbs. We've got the nouns, the stuff about nouns. So there's lots of information about nouns. Again, it's bogged down with a lot of vowel marking stuff that we don't care about, unfortunately, which makes it hard to even read it sometimes. We got particles, and then syntax, which goes over a lot of the same stuff, where basically you got tenses and moods. That's for verbs. So when we're studying verbs, we're going to have to go look at verbs and the tenses and moods section to fully grasp how verbs work. Cases are for nouns, so we'll be looking at that, but not today. We're not going to deal with the cases section today. Most likely, we're not going to start with that, but if we have time, maybe we'll go back to that, but I don't think we're going to be doing that. We got prepositions, which is where we're going to start today, and then more information on the nouns for syntax purposes, and pronoun and agreement, like how to do agreement between different parts of sentences, and then clauses in general. So how do clauses work? How do you form clauses? And then it gives some rules on very specific types of clauses. So you can see there's a bunch of stuff here that we're going to be eventually dealing with. And there's something called conjunction moi. So yeah, we'll get to all this stuff, but we're going to try to stick with very specific themes and topics and stuff we've dealt with before. And so I've touched upon nouns before. So we're going to go more into that type of stuff with you guys. We talked a little bit about prepositions and pronouns and gender and plurals. So we're going to get into greater depth in those specific aspects. And we'll be dealing with the syntax portion because the other, like a couple weeks ago, we didn't look at syntax. We were looking at, let's see, where were we? We were looking at pronoun, some of the pronoun stuff. And we were looking at numerals. Where are the numerals? Numerals right here. And particles. We were looking at particles, prepositions right here. So you see, we were looking at that kind of stuff. But yeah, so let's get started. And okay. So we will start with prepositions today. And that's going to be, looks like at page 453. So let's try jumping up to there. Now, PDF files don't have exact correspondence between pages. So it's kind of probably going to be more like 483, probably. Let's check. It's going to take a little bit. So I think it was 453. So let's see. All right, we're pretty close. All right, so 1 second here. Let me just take my screen share off for a second. Okay. Turning it back on now. So we might be looking up certain passages. We'll see. So now I did send you guys the PDF file. So if you want to, you can open that up and follow along. However, since it's going to be on the screen anyway, there's probably no point to even open it up because you'll be seeing it on my screen. So I would actually recommend just looking on the screen instead of opening it up as a PDF file. But the PDF is there for you guys to look after on your own time. Also, pray for my soul. I violated copyright to get that PDF file. So, you know, I'm in deep trouble here. So, but yeah, I decided to do that for your guys' benefit. And of course, I'm being silly. No, it's in the chat. It's in the chat. Go to the chat, and you should see a grammar of biblical Hebrew. It should be marked at 8:51 p.m. So your time zone, what would it be? 6:51 or 5:51 or 7:51? I don't know which 51 it would be. Do you see it? Steve was asking. It should be there. Now, Adam joined in right around the time Steve, what's the first message in your chat? What's the first message? I'll probably send it again just in case. I'll send it to you guys once again because it's a great resource, the PDF. Yeah, it should be after that. So you don't see any files, Steve. There should be. Did you see files from Walter where it says recommended reading? Because Walter sent that after me. So if you don't see Walter's, it may be because your version doesn't support it for some reason. But if you see Walter's, then I'll send it again. With that said, while we figure that out, we're gonna do prepositions. So a preposition is basically a prefix, or it can be a prefix, but it can also be a word that comes before it. Now, interestingly, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, some of the words that are prepositions actually were prefixed to it. So it's let me think of an example in English here. Well, I can't think of anything at the moment, but what I can tell you that is in English, and is a different word. So if we were saying, and he died, and he died, 3 different words, right? Well, guess what? In Hebrew, it's a single word. It's and he died. One word. But it's more like and died, and he is implied. That's the he form. So and died, and it's understood that it's talking about he, and died he. So but so in Hebrew, there are some prepositions which normally in Hebrew, the preposition, not and, because in Hebrew, and is actually part of the word, and gets added at the beginning. But for other prepositions, like let's say on, or like the Spirit hovered hovered on the waters from Genesis. So on the waters. In Genesis, it's on the waters. So two words, on the waters, upon. However, in Dead Sea Scrolls Hebrew, it sometimes is written as if it's a prefix, where it's on the waters. No, on, over, upon, it's all the same word. It's depends how you translate it. Whoops, I meant to send that to everybody. On the waters. There we go. Yeah, so that's kind of like prepositions are kind of like prefixes, essentially. So with that said, let's see here. It's going to go through each type of preposition. Well, we'll start going through these particular ones. Aleph Lamid means towards or unto. I usually translate it as unto. Okay, it means unto. However, the scribes very often confused Aleph Lamid al with Ayin Lamid o. Al o. They got confused a lot. No, Lamid, Lamid with an L. That's the letter. That's the name of the letter L in Hebrew. Aleph Lamid and Ayin Lamid. I forgot. I can annotate for you guys. So Aleph Lamid and Ayin Lamid. Well, we talked about what Lamid means. It's a word that basically means to learn, and that's why Talmud means disciple or student, because it's related to the root to learn. So that's all right. No problem. So these two words get confused, Aleph Lamid and Ayin Lamid, by the scribes. Usually Aleph Lamid is confused with Ayin Lamid. Ayin Lamid is not usually confused with Aleph Lamid, so keep that in mind. So oops, let me get rid of all right. Now, also interestingly, is the confusion also occurred from copyists who spoke Aramaic, where Ayin Lamid is the only word and it has all the meanings of Aleph Lamid. Um, I think so. I think Lamid alphabet would be learn alphabet. Although you'd probably have a the learn the alphabet. So you'd say Lamid ha or eh. Lamed Aleph Bet. To be learn the alphabet. So let's see here. So interesting that it tells us that okay, so generally speaking, Aleph Lamid expresses direction better than Lamed and is more specific and less ambiguous. Also interesting that the use of Aleph Lamid decreased dramatically in late Biblical Hebrew. So in original Hebrew, Aleph Lamid was used a lot more in earlier Hebrew. But by the time of the Second Temple period, it was used a lot less. And it tells us that we do not use it before an infinitive, nor before the conjunction asher, which means which or who. Okay, now bet is the letter B, and that it means in or into. They sometimes translate it as with, but it really means in or into. So we'll keep that in mind. So now they say it has many other meanings: on, against, with, by, or for, but I reject that because we know that other Hebrew words mean with, on, and against, and for. Oh yeah, bet does sometimes mean by. So in, into, and by are pretty much what bet means, but it does not really ever mean for, against, on, or with. But how you might translate it might essentially mean those things, but literally speaking, it does not mean those things. So they say, for example, they say it sometimes expresses participation in something. They say to eat at something. I would argue that he's translating that improperly. And it, like I said, it means in or into. So to eat into something, not at something, you're eating into something. Like let's say you're eating into an apple. The idea is you're biting into it. You're eating into it. So it's not at something like he seems to think it is, but, and remember, this is being translated from a French text. They made it in French and then translated it into English. So who knows if some of this is also incorrectly rendered from the French? Who knows? But of course, if it was translated by the same people who made the French version, then it would probably be translated correctly. But all that to say, we're trying to look at original Hebrew's core meanings and literal meanings, and not, you see, they don't, typically scholars do not go with literal meanings. They go with how it's used. So that's why they say on, against, with, by, or for, because that's how it's translated. So they say bet can be translated these ways. Therefore, it is used those ways. But when we're looking at what is the correct way to translate it, bet means in or into or by. It does not mean at, for, against, on, with, all these other things that they are saying. So like I said, Exodus 12:43, to eat at something, it would be to eat into something. But let's look at that verse just to corroborate it. Exodus 12:43. So Exodus 12:43. This is the ordinance of the Passover. Every son of the stranger shall not eat into it or eat in it. what is it saying? Eat into? They should not eat into the Passover. So it's a weird way to translate it, right? If you're trying to say, do not eat into the Passover, or do not eat in Passover. So the translation comes out strange in English because you wouldn't say it like that. That's why they translate it differently. But yeah, so like I said, it means like into or in. It can be used for verbs as well. Then this also tells us that it is used to indicate the predicate. And that's a fancy word. I forget the exact definition of predicate. So let's hold on a second. I'll double check. We want to make sure that we're understanding the words that they're using, because otherwise we're just reading random words, you know? All right, so predicate. So a property that a subject has or is characterized by. The subject is the dog. The predicate is barked very loudly. So it's predicated on the subject, I guess. Now, they render this as the God of my father. Now look, it says in my help, but that doesn't make sense as a translation. God of my father is in my help. That seems weird, right? But take a look at this right here. They translate it here, Isaiah 40:10, he will come like a strong man. But instead, it should be translated, he will come in a strong man. So like, that actually makes sense in English. He will come in a strong man. Like, how do I convey this? Like, let's say someone said, so and so will come into your life strong and happy. So that actually makes sense in English when you're saying it like that. He will come in such a way. He will come in this. He will come in that. He will come in this way. So when it says the God of my father is in my help, it's kind of like saying that that's how he comes in as. He's coming in into the scene as my help. The God of my father is in. He's in here, right? You know, he's present as my help. He's in my help. Let's take a look at the verse though, just to get the context again. But like we said, that's a very awkward way to translate it because it doesn't translate well into English. So in terms of having a translation that makes sense to people, we might, like for my Bible translation, I might decide to translate it differently because that is hard to understand, that kind of translation. So it says, and the name of the other was Eliezer, for the God of my father was in my help. So again, it's confusing as a literal translation, but like I said, it kind of means like coming in as. So right here we have I showed myself. It's actually I manifested. I manifested in El Shaddai. How did I make myself known? In the form of El Shaddai. So, and I manifested in El Shaddai, or I turned into El Shaddai. I became El Shaddai to them. So that's essentially what it's saying. It's not saying he was someone else and then became El Shaddai, but it's saying he identified as El Shaddai, and by identifying as El Shaddai, he enters into that identity. So I manifest in El Shaddai, in the form of, in the identity of El Shaddai. So that's a little bit of a confusing nuance for how bet works sometimes. But the normal way bet works in general is it has the meaning of in, into, or by. Like a strict translation from Hebrew to English, it will be in most of the time, or into. Interestingly, after a cough, you don't say in. Like, so if you were trying to say, like in English, you might say, I mean this, as in that. You say as in, but in Hebrew you don't say as in. You just say as. You don't say in after as, for some reason. And then they say, for some reason the bet drops here. It may be because the two letters, if they're the same, two letters that are the same letters in a row sometimes get dropped in Hebrew. But that's not necessarily original to Hebrew, but that's like a very common occurrence. And that's due to the scribes and due to people writing in general. They prefer to reduce two the same letters into one. So like as a, let's say in English, let's say um, let's say all, that's two L's, right? But notice what happens when we say always, always. Now it's only one L, right? And I'm not going to spell the whole world. You guys know how to spell always. So yeah, so it drops down to one L, interestingly. All right, so then we go to two. Oh, by the way, bet sometimes is added to nouns and verbs as a prefix, like to change the meaning into a new word. So like, all right, let me give an example. In English, you have, in English, probably from Latin or something, you have certain prefixes like in and out. In and X. X means out. So you have increment and you have excrement. So increment, it's coming in, X, it's coming out. And let me think, are there other examples here? trying to think, what are other words with X in English? Oh yeah, okay. Interior, exterior. Whoops. Oh man, I sent it to, whenever Steve messages me, it's a direct message, and then it changes, which is fine, but then it changes my response to only him. So that's the annoying. Increment versus excrement. So I'm writing it out for you guys, and then, no, you're fine. Interior versus exterior. So you see the prefix, it changes the word because the root, yes, you did it again. The root is terrier, except that's not the root. That's not quite the root. Instead, the root is ter, because you've got ire as another. Because, for example, you have inferior and superior. So you have the IR as an ending. So what's the root? The root for inferior would be fur, probably, or something along those lines. So you got in, fear, year, X, tier, year. That's how it works in Hebrew too, except we don't always realize which parts of words in Hebrew are prefixes and suffixes. But bet is added a lot to words which people don't realize to make these same kind of changes to nouns. So it can mean like in as a preposition, like in the heat of the moment, right? In, clearly in is not part of that word. It's a separate word. So it would be a prefix as a separate thing. Or let's say in the side of, no, in the right side of the wall, let's say. So in, or in the side that is, in the side of the wall that is right, let's say, okay? So clearly in is a prefix in that case. But if you say inside of the wall that is right, now that's a single word, inside. So Hebrew has a similar thing where sometimes bet is added and it doesn't make it a new word, it just makes it a in at the beginning. Other times it changes it into a completely different word and makes it the word. Just like I said, inferior, interior, and there's probably other interesting examples. But yeah, anyways, that's the basic gist of it. So you will see that so for bet as well. So keep that in mind. Now we've got two, or Lamid. It means two or four primarily, but it also has the meaning of belonging to. Okay, so let's see what some of this is. Now this one says, now this one's interesting where it talks about for me or to me. Wait, let's see. It's kind of like a subjective experience explanation to people. You're saying, for me, I feel this way. Or for me, I don't like this. So it's kind of like how that's you're saying it in Hebrew. Sometimes. Like so, for example, that's not so much for this first one. Gather for me 70 men. That's pretty straightforward. But down here, the reflexive nuance it's talking about, where it says, flee for you. But it's actually saying, flee you for you. That sounds redundant, right? Flee you for you. But it's actually saying something more along the lines of, for you, you should flee. This is for you that you should flee. So let's look up that verse to check. And this is well, this is kind of a funny thing. It looks like walk. No, I gotta look that up for a second. Okay, that's like a two. It's the same word twice. Genesis 12:1. Let's see what that says. All right. And said Yahuwah unto Abram. Yeah, so that is it means to walk. It's that word rock, a walk. It's related to go, walk, or come. It's the same. It's essentially the same word. So, lock. That's funny. Or it could be lock lick. Lock lick. So it's lock, which is go you. It's a command. It's imperative. It's Yahuwah speaking to Abraham what he is supposed to be doing. Abram, go you for you. So it's kind of like, for you, this is what you should do. So it's saying, for you, go you, for you, go from your country. Let's see the next example. Genesis 27:43. Whoops. Wait a minute, does it even have a 43? Okay, it does. And now, my son, here's the bet. Here's what we just discussed. Hear into or listen into my voice, and arise you, flee you for you unto Laban my brother. Heron word. This has het at the end. That means to, toward, but it's like word, like westward, northward, eastward, southward. Forward, toward, ward means in a direction. So heron word. Anyways, flee you for you. That is what you are to do. For you, do this. Numbers 22 34. Let's check that one out. You guys can see my mouse moving. Is that correct? When I'm sharing my screen?
Yep.
All right, cool. So what was it? I want to go back. Okay. And now, if it displeases, no, and if it is evil in thine eyes. So, and now, if it is evil in thine eyes, I will return for me. It's basically saying, for my part, I shall return. I will do this for me, for me, for my subjective point of view. This is what I'm going to do. So I will turn back, or I will return for me, for my part. Like, but what I mean, Steve, is if you see the arrow moving, like, do you actually see a arrow?
Yep.
Okay.
When it's an arrow.
Yeah, and then when I change it into annotation, then it becomes a pen. So ask. Let's see what this is. Let's see. And she sat down for her. Job 15:28. Oops, that's not the right one. Genesis 21:16. And she went and she sat down for her. It may mean something like on the lines of for herself. For herself. That could be a way to translate it. And she sat down for herself. So that might be how I decided to translate this concept. So like, flee for yourself. Go or walk for yourself. I will return for myself, or for my part. And for her part, she sat down. That's probably how I'll translate it, for her part. Now let me see this 2 Kings one. 2 Kings 4:3. And he said, go Why is there a yod at the end? Oh, I think it's a imperative. Yeah, that's what it is. Go borrow for yourself. Yeah, that's probably how I'm going to translate it. For yourself, for blank self, or for your part. That is how I shall probably translate it in all these instances. Um, then min means from, but usually it's just the mem and the noon gets dropped. So let's see Leviticus 4. No, I'm sorry. 1 Samuel 14:45. And like I said, mem almost always means from or of, derived of, derived from. There shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground. So let's see. Fall. Let's see. I'm not sure how this one is properly translated, where it says one single or one hair of his head, because there's a from at the beginning. Or maybe it's saying something along the lines of, like, if someone says from this, like you're basically saying like the extent of something. So from here to there type of thing. From the time you come into the house, you shall do this or whatever. So like, so in this case, it's saying shall not fall from a hair of his head groundward. This again has the word, the hey at the ending means word or two. Shall not fall earthward or groundward. But what is this? They're translating it as not. I didn't think it meant that. I thought it meant like if. Yeah. So oh, okay. So I'm just thinking about this for a second. What are they rendering? God forbid. Okay, Halil. Far be it. It comes from the root to mean profane, defile, pollute, desecrate, to begin. So it has that meaning of like forbidden. So God forbid. But it does not say God forbid. It just says forbid, and then as it basically says lives Yahweh. So basically, it's something on the lines of the living Lord forbid if it's basically saying it's not translated as they're translating it. It shouldn't be translated as they're translating it because they're translating it as not when it says if or though. So it's more on the lines of God forbid that the living God or the living Yahweh forbid that it should fall something like along the lines of should fall even from the hair of his head. Okay, maybe it's like the living Yahweh forbid that he should fall even from a hair of his head. So it's basically saying, God forbid that Jonathan should fall, even a hair of his head fall to the ground. So something along those. It's like from up. So by the way, interestingly, mem prefix. I'm going to touch upon this another time, but mem prefix is used, or I think it's mem noon is used as a comparative. An adjective means more than something else. Like sweeter. Let's see it actually right now. Sweeter than. Sweeter than honey and stronger than a lion. Yeah, it's mem prefix. So what is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion? But it's using from. So what is sweeter from honey and what is strong or what is stronger from a lion? But what it's saying is like from, starting from, or coming from, coming up from. So it's like as a starting point, what is sweeter honey from honey and above it. So what is like, and it's not, it doesn't say sweeter, but it's like, what is sweet? This word means sweet. So what is sweet? Going up from honey, and what is strong? Going up from a lion. That's kind of like the literal translation, but if we're doing a translation, for all translation intensive purposes, we're going to translate it as they do, sweeter than, stronger than, because that makes sense in English and that's what it's saying. But the literal translation is like from, but it's using that like going up from the starting point, from there up or beyond. So that's kind of what's going on with what we got here with from a hair from a hair of his head. He shall not fall, or from a hair of his head and beyond shall not fall to the ground. It's kind of like along those lines. I know it's kind of confusing, and I had a hard time trying to explain it to you guys because I don't fully grasp the correct meaning of it, but that's kind of the gist of it. But yeah, from the idea of separation and of distance comes the meaning of difference, which corresponds to that of for comparisons. That's what I was just sharing with you guys, the more than. Let's see. Before an infinitive, it has a causal meaning. I think it also has a causal meaning for participles too. Now, cause means like in verbs, when you say, I loved, that's a regular verb, but I caused to love it means you're not the one loving, but you made someone else love something. Or I killed versus I caused to kill. You might have caused to kill. You might have caused someone to kill by commanding them to kill someone. So you are not the one who killed someone, but you ordered someone to do it and they did it. So you caused them to do it. So when you do a participle, which is like an ing type thing. So I was talking, that's a participle. So if you have a mem prefix for a participle, it's like, all right, let's say I was killing. We'll use that example. I caused someone to be killing. That's essentially what the mem prefix would be for participle. Now, 1 second here. Okay. And by the way, this is not an actual confession. Just want to make sure, just in case there's any FBI agents watching here. I have not killed anyone, as far as I know. Aleph Lamid means on or upon. It can also mean like against, as some people said it could mean over. So apparently it's pretty pejorative in many instances. So like it means against. So it's kind of like, think about this. I'm leaning against the wall. I'm leaning upon the wall. I'm leaning against the wall. I'm fighting against you. So you see against can mean upon, but it can also mean like attacking. So, but apparently in Hebrew, the upon meaning also means like it can mean attacking, essentially, like going against something or going against someone. A bird, something that's a burden to him. So Isaiah 1:14, let's check that one out. That sounds interesting. Isaiah 1:14. Your months and your appointed times. My soul hates your appointed times and your months or your new moons. They are upon me. They are upon me for what is this word? For a trouble. I weary bearing. Or I am wearied bearing, because that's a passive. Noon prefix is a passive as a verb. So he is wearied. Yeah, so they are upon me according to a trouble. It's like again, it's translated a little bit awkwardly, but like I said, it's like kind of like a burden. They are on me for a trouble. So, well, it's going to be a little bit difficult to translate some of these things, but that's what's literally being said here. Or maybe we'd say, let's see, I don't know, but anyways. Genesis 48:7. Let's check that one out. And as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way. So, and I in my coming, and I in my coming from Padan, Rachel died upon me. Rachel died on me. Well, let's see what they say about that. Okay, he's saying that, I think he's saying that he feels somewhat to blame for it because remember, he loved her rather than Leah, and because of that, Rachel was punished with barrenness, and then she had two sons, but the second son was difficult pregnancy, and she died in childbirth, and that was all because of Jacob uh, putting Rachel on a pedestal and ignoring Leah. So Rachel's sufferings was because of Jacob. So it says to indicate a victim. But he says, I lost Rachel. And that's how they translate it. Numbers 11:13, they cry to my annoyance. So let's check that one out. Wait a minute. Okay, they weep unto me. For hold on a sec. Melissa, she dropped out. Hopefully she comes back. Let me see what's going on with her. Whoops. Yeah, I miss her terribly. It's so sad. All right, well, we'll continue. We'll see. I sent her a message and we'll see if she comes back. Okay. Wait, wait, I thought she dropped out and it says that she's still here. What the heck? That's weird because I didn't approve her back. That's weird.
Who, me?
Yeah, it said,
Thank you, Ronnie. Go ahead whenever you're ready, please.
I thought it said you had dropped out and you're still here. That's weird. I've never seen that happen before. All right. Anyways, we'll go back. For they weep upon me. They weep on me. I could see that like, a literal thing, like they're like throwing themselves upon him, you know. Oh, interesting. I guess Steve says that does happen sometimes with Zoom. So we see here, in Psalm 142:4. Let's check that one out. Whoops, gotta go to the previous verse. This is my spirit. Upon me, overwhelm it's basically in my spirit overwhelming itself upon me, then you knew my path. I guess, I'm not sure, but anyways, hey guys, I'm just gonna quickly stop sharing for a sec. I need to, I gotta change out of my shirt. I'm really hot. It's getting hot in here. We turned the heat on instead of having the AC on. So, one sec.
We see you.
Okay, guys, I am back. And I'm gonna start sharing the screen again. Okay, so if upon the king is, if pleasure is upon the king, if upon the king pleasure, if it pleases the king, made the sea shall quiet, may the sea quiet from upon us. The preposition cough, that's the K at the beginning of words. It means like or as. I am like a butterfly. You add cough at the beginning. He is sweet as honey. That uses cough. It says it does not belong to the construction of any verb. Seems to have a demonstrative origin. They say, what does that mean? They have a footnote. Thus or here type of thing. Let's see. This can mean similitude or resemblance. In the likeness of, in the manner of, like equality or resemblance. So it can mean exactly like or more or less like. So because it can mean both, it can mean either exactly equal or more equal, or not exactly equal or like but more, or like but less. It can mean all those things. It can mean exactly like but even more so, like even less so. Because of that, now we see What was that one passage? Let me double check that. It's from the New Testament. Trying to look up that one verse to see. Yeah, Philippians 2:6. To be equal with God. So what if instead of equal, it was like? Or as? Interesting. Look at this. This Greek. Through the idea of seeming, similar, as much, equal, like. Well, let's see if they sometimes translate it. Comes from the word to see, which means like to seem, I think. Anyways, that's a tangent into Greek, but I do believe that there's Hebrew root of the New Testament. Yes, as Melissa said, I am sweet as honey. But you bother to neglect that I'm spoiled and rotten honey. So Nehemiah 7:2 says, for he was as a man of faith or of truth. He was the exact similitude of. And then approximately 10 years. That's interesting. Let's see that. Ruth 1:4. They translate it as they dwelled there as or like 10 years. That's funny because like in English we'll say like I was there for like, a month. Like it's like about. So one thing to keep in mind that is if this is the word of God, this is divine word of God. God knows all things, right? So why didn't God say this very specific, they dwelled there 10 years? Because it says that elsewhere in scripture, it'll say the exact, it'll say specific. Dwelt there 10 years. Or if it wasn't 10 years, then how long was it? 9 years? 11 years? How many years and months was it? Well, in other passages, it does say year and month. In Noah's, it says what month, year and month of that year it was. But there's another passage. Let me see here. Came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first of the month. He Shalom began to reign in the 39th year of Uzziah, and he reigned a full month in Samaria. Came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th of the month. So, there's very specific stuff here. And yet we see that here it says about or like, which means that was probably not written by God. Instead, it was written by someone who did not know how long they were there. Makes sense, right? Someone who doesn't know how long they're there for would say about. This is where Melissa decided to get off because she doesn't like this. I'm just joking, of course. Yeah, so to clarify, when I say it's not the word of God, I don't mean it's not authoritative, it's not scripture, but clearly whoever wrote this didn't know. So that means there's ignorance on this writer. So God is not ignorant, so God did not write this passage. But he inspired this passage. And there's nothing false about this passage. It's true. They were there about 10 years. But how long is about? We don't know. God knows, but God didn't tell us. Or he did, but whoever decided to make this extract of Ruth didn't understand correctly how long it was and guessed. Said about 10 years, but I don't know the exact amount, so I'll just say about 10. Interesting, we got something 2 or 3. Where does it say 2 or 3? Let not all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up. 2 Kings, and there looked out to him 2 or 3 eunuchs. Was it 2 or 3? Wouldn't the author know? Wouldn't God know if it was 2 or 3? So whoever wrote this was like, oh, well, it was 2 or 3. Why wouldn't they say it's 2 eunuchs or 3 eunuchs? Why do they say 2 or 3? And in Matthew, it says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. So is that saying that sometimes you need 2 people and sometimes you need 3 people? That doesn't make sense, right? It seems illogical to say that so if when 2 are gathered in his name, he's there, then you don't need to say 3. You don't need to say when 3 are gathered in his name, I am there, if he's there when 2 people are there. However, if it says 2 or 3, that seems to imply that sometimes he's not there when there's only 2, and that you need to have 3 in order for him to be there. And other times, he is there when it's 2, but that seems to be contradictory. Is it 2 or 3? Well, probably the author didn't know originally, whoever wrote it or whoever copied it, because it might not have been the author, it might have been a scribe. So the original, instead of saying 2 or 3, it might have been a few. So instead, it might have been for where a few are gathered together in my name, because guess what? Sometimes the word few can mean 2 or 3. So we often think few means like 3 or 4, but some words have the meaning of like 2 or 3. So it's probably that the original, there was like a word there that was ambiguous. It could mean 2 or 3. So it says, when a few are gathered in my name, I'm in the midst of them, which would make sense because you're not saying sometimes 2, sometimes you need 3, and sometimes you need 2. It's saying when a few, and what's a few? 2 or 3. So When even just a few are gathered in my name, I'm in the midst of them, which means even when there's two, even when there's three, I'm in the midst of them. So two or three is probably a later rendering, and the original is probably few. But all that to say, why was I saying that anyway? Oh yeah, about 10 years. That's all just to say that clearly the text of scripture is not, some passages seem to imply that there is some ignorance and that therefore God did not write it himself. Whoops, I thought I was sharing my screen. I guess I was not sharing the screen. Steve, what are you saying? Which part was it translated properly? Like the original part. I wasn't sure what you mean. But I don't know why I stopped sharing my screen, so I gotta share it again. So Ruth 1:4. See, look, and they dwelled there about 10 years. And they dwelled there, and they dwelled there about or like as 10 years. Okay, so interestingly, two or three doesn't have or in Hebrew. All right, Melissa's coming back. Or in this passage, it might. Joshua 7:3. Let's see. Okay. All the people, let not go up all the people like 2,000 men, 2,000 man, or like 3,000 man shall go up. So this one actually has or, but in other places like 2 or 3 witnesses, like in the Torah, we see it does say, I think, or. Wait a minute. Okay, where's the 2 or 3? Go ahead, come on. So in some places, it doesn't have or. Yeah, see, like right here. It's in italics. The eunuchs. And looked they unto him 2, 3 eunuchs. And according to the grammar books, that is a thing that happens, and it means 2 or 3. So that will probably be for another time. That's too much of a tangent to look at the Codex Sinaiticus. Steve's asking about if we look at the Codex Sinaiticus to see how it's rendered in there, but I think it's too much tangent for our purposes. But we can check it out sometime. Just not on this lesson thing. So The expected preposition is often omitted, they say, after cough. Oh, they have this vowel mark, so I don't know what. But that's what he claims, but I'm not sure that's always necessarily, like sometimes they're not always accurate, you know. So let's see, Isaiah 28:21. Let's check it out. Oops. Okay. For so you would think it would say as in Mount Perazim. Like so, for as Mount Perazim, he shall rise up, Yahweh, as valley in Gibeon, he shall be wroth. Um, so maybe though, they're claiming that there's something not translated, but what if it's saying like you know how the mountain is like rised up from the ground? The mountain is arisen from the ground, like it sticks up, right? And you know how it talks about the valleys and the hills skipping up and down? It's just saying that the hills are going up and down. That's how hills are, right? So what if instead it's saying that Yahuwah rises up, Yahuwah will mount himself up like the Mount of Perazim. Just like the Mount Perazim is lifted up, so shall he rise himself up like a mountain. And then the word for wrath is this word. As the valley in Gibeon, he shall, what is that word? The root of that word? Tremble, shake, rage. So as the valley quivers, or as the valley is moved, it's basically like talking about how the valley moves up, is depressed or whatever, the valley is a specific way. Or maybe quake, because maybe the valley sometimes has earthquakes or something. Who knows the exact thing? But so it could be something along the lines of as the valley in Gibeon, he shall quake. Because maybe the valley of Gibeon literally quakes, or something along those lines. So sometimes these grammar experts, like they have some amazing insights, but sometimes I think sometimes experts can miss small details of basic things, like basic arithmetic. Sometimes experts can get basic arithmetic wrong when they're expert mathematicians. You know, they can make those mistakes just as anyone can make, because they can overlook things. So, so earthquakes wouldn't be global warming, but actually, you know, that's of course that's a tangent. Steve's asking about it, but I will say that I actually do believe in climate change, and that it is caused by man, in that is the primary fulfillment of the prophecies, that the disasters of the climate are being caused by the sins of man, where we abuse the earth. You know, we're commanded in Genesis to be caretakers of the earth, you know, to rule over, but not to abuse it. Rule over
That
the
was
earth.
just for Eden. He didn't say that
No,
over.
it's for the earth. We're supposed to take care of the whole earth.
Where does it
And
say that?
it doesn't say Eden. Look at Genesis.
Well, yeah, but he was in the garden.
Where does it say he was in the garden when that was commanded?
Where does it say he wasn't? You tell me.
Well, if you're going by chronology, chapter 2 is when he goes in the garden. Chapter 1, they're not in the garden yet. So, and according to Jubilees also, Jubilees gives specific information on when they enter the garden. But so let's see here. God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful, multiply, replenish
I
the
guess
earth.
that means
Subdue it.
that my kids got to do the grass better. They better take care of this yard.
Well, doing the grass, that's just
I'm sorry, just kidding.
that's just paying your dues so you don't get a fee from the city or something. But to have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. That still applies today. We are kings of the earth. You know, we were created higher than the animals, but we're caretakers of them. We know we can eat them for food, not all of them, because there's unclean animals we're not supposed to eat, but they're there for us to use, but they're not there for us to abuse. And in the recent time of our modern age, we are abusing the earth. We are abusing life. And so we reap what we sow, and the consequences of our actions are we are causing the earth to be continually worse and worse due to our sins. Well, an interesting thing is that the earth very much acts like having an immune system. And so, for example, hurricanes, did you know that after hurricanes come, the air above the hurricane and the water of the hurricane area is the purest of pure, like it becomes purified. Similarly, when you have fires like forest fire, and the forest floor becomes clean and pure, fresh.
Oh, it's almost like we're stuck in a washing machine when that happens.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
And you know, the global flood of Noah wiped everybody out, started over, purified the earth. And earthquakes, what do we think causes earthquakes? Well, it's like you know how humans can have like seizures and stuff and violently react to things. Well, I think the earth does stuff like that, especially like if you've looked into things like fracking, for example. Fracking can cause earthquakes, and you have to wonder, there's all this oil is in the earth. What is it? Because it's not renewable resource. There is some reason to think that the oil of the earth may have some analogous function to blood, like we have blood in our system. It may be that the oil functions like blood for the earth, and when we take
No,
out,
that would be lava.
if we take the oil out, then we're causing the earth to malfunction, and have these violent reactions, the more we're taking from the earth. So this is things to consider. So I used to be very much Republican in all my values, and one of the things I believed was that climate change, or global warming they were calling it at the time, was not man-made or not man-caused. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, scripture says that these things will happen. The very things scientists are warning us about, the Bible says is going to happen. So why am I so against this? And then I realized that I'm against it because that's the Republican thing to say or believe. But I realized that it makes more sense to believe what the Bible says, that humans are going to be causing these things. It talks about rising waters in some of the Apocrypha, like the oceans will rise. Scientists are warning us about this, where the ice from glaciers is going to melt more and more, and the oceans will rise and islands will sink. Well, guess what? Some of the Apocrypha books warn explicitly about this happening in the last days, where islands will sink, oceans will rise. So anyways, I think people should consider the very real possibility that climate change is real, and that humans are the primary cause of it, and that it is fulfillment of Bible prophecy. But that's a fun tangent, but let's get back to the Hebrew. I do enjoy those topics. Steve always gets us on these tangents, but they're good. They're good tangents. Well, also Steve said every seventh ocean wave is calm. I don't know if that's true, but that's pretty cool. If that is, that sounds interesting. Okay, so see where it says he thinks that Aleph Tav was dropped out of this passage, where he thinks it should say should one have treated Aleph Tav, a whore or harlot, so should someone have treated our sister Aleph Tav? Remember I told you guys Aleph Tav is can be like directed to something or with. So they have treated should they have done with our sister as one does with a whore or harlot? But the passage really should just be translated as should one do with our sister as a harlot? Basically, should one treat our sister as a harlot? That's what it's saying. Should one do with our sister as a harlot? It's not. So they think Aleph Tav has dropped out, but reality is it hasn't dropped out. It's just slightly different meaning than what they think. To your brothers as well as to you. That's what they think. It's really to your brothers like you to your brothers. The prepositions bet and Onieh and Lamid are found. So you do see the prepositions there. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so compound prepositions, interesting. So they're formed, they say, mainly with mem prefix and Aleph Lamid as the first element. So Ahari is behind, but M at the beginning makes it from behind. Aleph Tav is, I guess, near or with, and Ayin Mem is also with, but Mem at the front makes it from near, from with, from between, because Bet Yod Nun is between, Mem at the beginning makes it from between, from before, from above, because Mem is added, Mem is from beside. So let me just say, okay, so behind, from, near, from, with, from. Oh, and by the way, Ayin Mem is the primary word for with in Hebrew, not Aleph Tav. Between and Mem. Before and Mem. Above, whoops. Above and Mem. From. So under and from. So from under. But you never have to in. You don't have to in. Unto in. So with Aleph Lamid at the beginning, they translate it as behind, but it's to behind or unto behind. They translate it as between, even though it's unto between or to between. But you can see why they don't translate it that way, because it sounds weird in English. They translate unto under as under. And they say this is redundant right here. To, from. This one's for the purpose of. Let's see. Exodus 20:20. All I know is 2020 was a horrible number. Horrible. Let's see. Okay, so it's sake, because, account. For in the purpose, or for in the sake of. So yeah, it's a little confusing, the literal rendering, but these, this word right here is formed with Lamid prefix, bet prefix, and then this word over or aber. And we've got ayin dalet, which means till. So till two. Under two or four. Yes, so those are prepositions. All right. So let's see what we've got here so far. So it's almost 11 o'clock. But I'm going to continue some more. I don't know how much longer though, but we're going to do it a little bit longer. So today we will check out gender. I'm going to go through gender. Let me see how many pages gender stuff is. Okay, it's only a few pages, and then there's plurals, but we're not going to get the plurals today. But we will do gender, and gender is interesting. So we'll get the plural next time. All right, so the gender is important. So just keep in mind, by the way, that in Hebrew, like in other ancient languages, gender conveys meaning, important meaning. A lot of people just say, well, a word is a word because it's just arbitrary. Like it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just people decided this is masculine, this is feminine, no rhyme or reason. But it's not true. It's based on what the function we're imposing on someone. So, for example, in our society, at least in the past, pants was considered masculine, and dresses or skirts or whatever considered feminine, right? Those are roles we are assigning to those things, function. And we do that for many things. But what we're really doing when we're calling something masculine or feminine is we're saying, like, this is a little bit, I don't want to be too crass here, but basically the ancients thought of sex all the time, and they applied everything to sex. So, you know, like a lot of mythology, for example, has sex in it, like the gods, the different gods, the way they think of creation is gods having sex and creating life and things like that. We don't believe that as believers of the Bible, but the reason they believe that is because they assign gender to everything. And I don't know if you guys can relate, but at least guys, maybe guys can relate to this more, but like there's so many things that I might see in life where it's like I'm not intentionally trying to think of sex, but like it's just hard not to think of it when something looks like something. So like well, first of all, our society is very sexualized in general, so that might play a part into it. But guess what? The ancient cultures were sexualized as well. They had their worship of other gods, for fertility cult. You know, they had priests where they would have sex with priests and stuff, priestesses, all horrible, crazy stuff. Holy prostitutes they would have and things like that. But so, anyways, you have like what's called phallic objects. So basically, anything that's long and pointy resembles the masculine traits, and round spherical objects might resemble the feminine concept, right? So humans see those things and they relate them. It's kind of like when you look in the clouds and you say, oh, that cloud looks like this object. Or when you're looking at something and you see faces, you see eyes and a mouth in something like your syrup when you're having waffles for breakfast or pancakes. You see the Virgin Mary in your pancakes. You know, it's because the way our brain works, we see things that aren't there, but we try to relate it to things that are important to us. So we see something that looks like something similar to something we hold dear to ourselves, and so we connect it to that. But so the ancients did the same thing, but to a much greater extent, where they basically sexualized everything. And of course, swear words, what we call profanity, very often that takes a sexual meaning. Almost all profanity is like having to do with sexuality, interestingly. And so we have society has like an obsession with sexuality. And so gender, I believe gender for languages comes from that concept that we're so focused on it, where we see everything through the lens of masculine and feminine. So what is the role of a man in a relationship when he is with his wife? First of all, he's very strong, physical. He's the protector, provider. He defends his home. He attacks enemies. And when he's having sex with his wife, he goes in, he inserts, right? He penetrates. It's inward. It's forcing upon. That's the masculine role in life. Whereas the feminine role, she's submissive, weak, receptive. She takes in. Why does she take in? Because a woman literally takes in a man when they're having sex. So the man goes in and the woman takes in. And interestingly, in mechanics, you talk about plugs. You have the male plug and the female plug, or the whatever you call it. But I think some people might know what I'm talking about. Where like mechanics and engineers use this language to refer to plugs and outlets and stuff, right? So there's that relationship there. Something that goes into something else is masculine, something that receives something is feminine. So in the same way, all words in ancient times, especially in Hebrew, but all ancient languages, saw all objects through a sexual lens of masculine and feminine. But it originated as sexual, but eventually it stopped being sexual, and people weren't thinking about sex all the time. They were just, oh yeah, that's the way we've always said it. That's masculine, that's feminine. But it's because we're comparing it to function, relational function, where it's strong, dominant, forceful, or submissive, receptive, taking in. So something like a table might be masculine because it holds something up. On the other hand, a couch might be feminine because someone's sitting on it, so it's taking in. Driving a car, a car might be masculine because it goes, like it goes forward. A pump, let's say you're pumping air into your tire, that might be feminine because it's receiving. It's receiving a push. And shoes might be feminine because you're stepping into them, you're stomping on them. Same thing with gloves and a mask, because you're going in, they're receiving. Their function is to receive. A river is falling down. It's flowing. It's getting pushed. So a river might be feminine. So there's different things like that. So keep in mind, that's how gender works for languages. Now, because most people don't know about this. Most people, when they think about gender, masculine and feminine, they have no idea that this is what gender means for languages. for objects. So they learn these languages just thinking, well, like let's say I'm learning French or Spanish. I'm just learning these. I learned that this means masculine just because that's what they tell you, but there's no reason. It's just random. There's no logic to it. That's masculine, that's feminine, because that's the way it is. But that doesn't make sense. It's illogical. The reason it's masculine or feminine is because those people assigned masculine or feminine traits to those objects. But you can assign masculine and feminine traits to the same thing. Like for example, one object in one language could be masculine, and in another language it could be feminine because they're assigning a different relationship function to it. So let's say a book. Maybe a book is masculine in my language or to me because it teaches, and teaching is a masculine quality. So because teaching is a dominant force, of course, as Paul says, women should not teach. I'm saying that loosely because I think women can teach, but obviously, Paul's talking about teaching being a masculine quality, right? So the idea of teaching, a book teaches us information. So therefore, maybe a book is masculine. On the other hand, someone else might think, you know what, I think a book is feminine because someone writes stuff into the book, and therefore the book receives words from someone else writing, or they're being inscribed, and someone's writing into the book, and therefore it's receiving letters. So maybe it's feminine. It all depends on the culture and how they view that word in relationship to other words. What is their function with other words? What is their meaning, the meaning of the root word? That's all, okay? So that's a long explanation to gender. But now, with that said, now we'll go and talk about gender. So of course, well, it says for certain beings, okay, living beings, the nouns, usually male and female, naturally adopt the corresponding gender. So female people are feminine usually, and masculine, and male people are masculine generally. And same goes for like animals often. So as an example, there's a feminine marker, which is hey and tav. Remember we discussed hey and tav is a feminine marker. So you have Aleph hey het, Aleph het, which is brother, Aleph het wa tav, which is feminine brother, which means sister. Now, interestingly, a ha is spelled with a wa, which usually makes it the feminine and plural, but the wa there is not the plural wa, it's a vowel marking to convey the sound. So it's a hot or a hot or a hoot, and it just means the it's basically what's being written is let me see, I'll write it in the chat for you guys. It's basically it's AHT, but they're providing an extra vowel to tell us how you pronounce it. But the original of that word is AHT. That's how you would pronounce. That's how you would spell it. And then the plural would have been AHOT, or excuse me, AHUT. But because they added that wa to the singular, now the plural for that becomes, with a yod added, Aleph het yod wa tav. That's not normal. That's not normal feminine ending though. That's like a rare exception to the general rules. Whoops, I just saved. I didn't mean to save it. But yeah, so husband's father, husband's mother, son, daughter. Remember, the origin of daughter is from son, and it's benat like banith, and then the noon got dropped. Remember, I told you guys about that. The noon got dropped, but they are from the same root, bet noon. And here we have young man, olam or olim, and young woman, olima. You have also probably heard it as alma or alma, and that is used in Isaiah in that famous passage about whether the woman's a virgin or not, alma, which has the masculine form is alam or alim. King is ruler, it's malik, and queen, malika, because that's the feminine of king. Calf is ugal. Heifer or female calf is agla. Steer, so it's a male cow. Of course, male cow doesn't make sense. That's a contradiction, but I'm just using simple language for you guys. The male version of a cow is per, par, and female version is para, cow. Lamb is kabish, and female lamb is kabisha. And kid,
Actually,
what is it?
I was going to say a male cow is actually a bull. A steer just means it's neutered.
Well, let's actually
And
look
a
that up.
female is a heifer.
Yeah, it says heifer. No, so calf,
Oh, okay.
calf and heifer. So heifer is a young, according to this, it's a young. So let's look though. Whoops. Steer. Nope. Wrong. Okay, so they're using that as that, but I don't think that's what it didn't originally mean that. So look, so right here, it comes from a young bull or cow, steer. So if you go to Old English, it means a young bull. That's what it originally meant. But now, over time, words can change. Now remember, this was translated from French. So the person who translated it from French may not have realized that steer just means, in our modern English, it means castrated. But it's just like, you know the word meat? Guess what? The word meat now means flesh in English, right? It means flesh. The flesh of an animal used as food. Archaic means food. Archaic, a meal. Obsolete, meal, flour. We're going to ignore the slang meanings. And then, but guess what? In Middle English and older modern English, it meant food. Just like in the King James version, it's used to mean food. So meat means food. but it changed the meaning over time. In King James, like I said, it means food, not meat. It doesn't mean flesh, but it changed meaning over time. So steer has a similar, probably has a similar thing. But yeah, so steer originally meant a young male, a male cow. And it probably is still referred to that by some, like if you look in the dictionary, like an official dictionary, it'll probably say that it is still acceptable to use it like that. It's probably just not common. Just like gay. Gay means homosexual as the primary meaning, but people still occasionally use it to mean happy, like it originally meant. It's still used, but it's much rarer. So it's probably the same with steer, where it is used in the original sense, but more rarely. Kid is interestingly, it's spelled the same. So kid might actually originate from Hebrew. Kid might be a Hebrew word, potentially. So you've got Gadi and young she-goat, Gadia. And then you have others are indicated by distinct nouns. So you have ish, man, and isha. So how I would pronounce it would be something like Aish or Aish and Asha. Now father is Av, mother Am, two different words. Although Am is a masculine, it's spelled in a masculine way, even though it's feminine in meaning or reference, because it references a woman. Ram is Aya, but female ram, a ewe, is Rachel, same as Rachel. He goat, Tish, and she goat, Uz. Jackass, good word, is Hemur, and Shias is Atun. But sometimes there's only one noun, either masculine or feminine, which designates any individual of the species regardless of their actual gender. For example, bear is always rendered as masculine. Because why? Because bears are strong, dominant species. And interestingly, this happens primarily with wild animals. Wild animals have a well, not only wild animals, but like all the unclean wild animals have like the primary like dominant quality. So you have like domesticated animals are kind of treated as part of the family in some sense. So they're treated kind of like on the same, in some ways, similar to humans. So that's why their gender is distinguished. But animals like bears, they're strong creatures, strong dominant creatures. Dogs and wolves, strong dominant creatures. Therefore, the dog is always masculine, wolf always masculine. Rabbits or hares, they're very soft, feminine. They're very weak, vulnerable creatures, so they're always feminine. Doves, these very light birds, they're always feminine. Storks, feminine. Bees, ants, feminine, because they're so vulnerable, so weak. So even male ants, male bees are feminine in the gender because compared to humans, they have a feminine quality of weakness. Now they say sometimes a masculine noun is treated as feminine when talking about a female. So like it might use a masculine word, but it might have a feminine verb connected with it. So sometimes that does happen. Here they say, we must admit, however, that the reason which determines the gender often escapes us. But so here are some general ideas, some general rules here of how gender works in Hebrew for determining which nouns are which gender and why. Where does it say milch? I think yeah. So what is that, German or something? I don't know. It's or maybe it's just a rare English word. Yep, it's a rare English word. There you go. Interesting. So yeah, that's something new things you learn every day. Abstract nouns with a feminine ending are treated as feminine. The others are treated as masculine. So abstract nouns that do not have a feminine ending are treated as masculine, but if it has a feminine ending, it is treated as feminine, which makes sense. So request is feminine because it has a feminine ending. Oath, feminine because it has a feminine ending. Strength and glory are masculine because they don't have feminine endings. Concrete nouns with a feminine ending are almost all treated as feminine. That's because they have a feminine ending. Therefore, they should be treated as feminine. So it says some useful observations about the gender of these concrete nouns without feminine ending may be made. Nouns of waterways are generally masculine. So river, canal, wadi, they're masculine words. Water, sea, rain, they're masculine. But well and spring are feminine, perhaps due to the fact that they receive water. Like, so all these other words are forcibly pushing water. River forces water. Canals, wadis, water itself, and sea is strong dominant force. Rain falling down, pushing the water to the ground. But a well, the water is just collecting. It's coming down and just collecting into the well. And a spring, again, it's just stagnant. It's getting collected. So that's perhaps why they're feminine. And then names of countries. So countries and cities are considered feminine because land is considered feminine. So even though they have a masculine, they don't have a feminine ending. So they're spelled masculine in the singular, but they have a feminine meaning and function. So names which designate people and land are masculine in the first case and feminine in the second. So like, let's say Judah. If it's talking about the people of Judah, it's masculine. But if it's talking about the land of Judah, it's feminine. Same thing with Israel. If it's the people of Israel, it'd be masculine, but if it's the land of Israel, it's feminine. Names of cities with bet are masculine. That's because bet means temple. And usually temple is of a god. So temple of the god Lahem, temple of the god El. That's typically when you see bet, it's meaning temple of a specific god. But earth and its regions, like we said, Aretz or Arej means earth, land, country, and it's feminine. City, Oyer is feminine. The orb, Tabil, that basically means world, and it's feminine. Wait, no, wait. Is it saying? I think it's saying that it's feminine. Yeah. Sheol, feminine. Circle, north, south, feminine. Nouns of instruments, and so instruments, tools. There's sword, peg, cup, jug, sandal, bed. Even though they're spelled like a masculine singular, they're feminine. And so the reason they're not spelled with a feminine ending is because it was considered obvious by their forms or by their meaning. So like earlier, when we had the different forms, we had to distinguish between masculine and feminine, right? So how do we know it's masculine or feminine? You need the ending. That's why you need the ending to know if it's masculine or feminine. So is it a young man or a young woman? Young man has no ending for feminine, but young woman does, because you need to distinguish between the two. A ruler, is it a male one or a female ruler? A male is king, female is queen. We need that feminine ending to know between the two. However, when it comes to instruments and land, the gender is obvious because of its meaning. The very definition of these words conveys to the people, oh yeah, that's feminine. Of course that's feminine because of its function. So we don't need to differentiate between masculine and feminine for those words, because those words are clearly feminine or clearly masculine, depending. So yeah, so instruments like tools, so sword, peg, cup, jug, sandal, bed, no feminine ending. For the singular, they do mark the difference when it's plural. And by the way, I say this for Hebrew in the Bible, but in original Hebrew, like Akkadian, it may have been very different. So I'll be studying that eventually as well to see how it used to be originally in Hebrew, like the original Hebrew, just like Akkadian, but biblical Hebrew. So as far as understanding biblical Hebrew goes, this is how it works. And that's the primary importance to us anyway, because we're trying to read and study scripture fluently. So we should understand these rules, but it'll also help us to know if these rules are original to the original Hebrew or not. So I'll be checking that out to confirm if this is the case for Akkadian, or maybe Akkadian distinguished and added a feminine ending for land and instruments. Akkadian may have added feminine endings to instruments and the land and members, whereas biblical Hebrew doesn't. So I'll check that out and let you guys know in a future meeting what the case is for that. But yeah, so members of the body are also feminine. often those found in pairs as well. So eye, ear, tooth, jaw, shoulder, arm, hand, right hand, palm, finger, rib, hip, thigh, knee, leg, thigh, foot, horn, wing. Those are all feminine because they're tools. And what's a tool? You know how someone says to a man, "Oh, you're such a tool," yeah, right? It's considered an insult because they're being used. A woman, you know, in the context of a sexual relationship, a woman is used by the man. That's the concept. So masculine uses feminine. Feminine does not use the masculine. That's how it works. So any tool is feminine because it's being used by the wielder, the one who applies the force to the tool and manipulates the tool to do as he pleases. Now, some body parts like breast and loins, sides, it says it's masculine, probably because they have a dominant quality. Other feminine nouns include stone, belly, soul. Apparently, soul sometimes is treated as masculine when it's referring to a man, but in general, soul is a feminine word. Nouns usually feminine. The word sign, almost always feminine. Fire, way, tongue, time. Sun apparently they claim is feminine. I was able to understand that sun is masculine, so I'll have to look into that some more to double check on that. Nouns whose gender varies. Well, we saw some earlier, right? But some examples of nouns that vary their gender are light, path, valley, vineyard, enclosure, gate, and place. Oh yeah, no, gate. Place, it says, is very seldom feminine. Okay, and so feminine abstract nouns can be formed by adding the feminine ending to an adjective or to a participle. So you got evil, good, right. And to make it an abstract noun, you add the feminine ending to it. So someone is evil, someone is good, someone is right, someone is just. But if you want to talk about evil itself, you add the hey at the end. If you want to talk about good itself, you add hey at the end. Rightness itself, justness itself. So feminine makes it abstract idea. All right, it looks like we're pretty much finished with this, guys. That's essentially how gender works. Well, it is a body part for animals. But you know, in the original, when we were apes and monkeys, originally 700 billion years ago, you know, we probably had horns and tails and wings. We probably flew and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? But no, of course I'm joking. But yeah, it applies to animals as well in terms of body parts. What did your ex have? Mother Earth, interestingly, actually comes from Second Esdras. Yeah, so she used you, therefore she wore the pants. She was the man. So yeah, do you guys have any questions? Like as I said, we're pretty much about to end. Any thoughts, comments of what we discussed? Did it kind of go over your head, or did it make a lot of sense? As I'm waiting just to see if you guys have questions, I'm trying to go to these table of contents, but the PDF is being super slow. It's not moving. All right, let's see what we got here. Was there anything else about gender that you wanted to look at? Going to the table of contents to see. So what did you guys think of that sexual education? Did you like it? What,
I must have missed that part.
you missed the part where I went on for like 30 minutes about or not, I'm exaggerating, but it was like 15 minutes about why male, masculine, and feminine gender exists.
Oh, I missed it.
What? I thought you were listening. You must have not been paying attention. What
I was
were you?
probably in Walmart.
Yeah, re-listen to it and you'll hear a wonderful talk about stuff. So we might review a little bit next time the gender, like, or maybe next week on Monday, we'll review the masculine and feminine. Like, excuse me, how to spell masculine and feminine, singular and plural. I gotta check it out for you guys. It's mostly just stuff with vowel markings though, if you see. So, all right, let me stop sharing that. So, I shared with you guys the PDF file. So should be good. And I'll see you guys Monday. Hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. And sorry that for some parts of it, I was a little bit slow in trying to explain some things because, you know, some of it was a little bit harder to explain because I didn't fully grasp a few parts in terms of the correct translation. But overall, I try to do my best to convey to you the meanings. Hopefully it helped. And I look forward to continuing our study together of Hebrew. Let's continue practicing Hebrew together online periodically, and I hope to see you guys Monday. And then next Thursday, we will do our best to go to the next interesting topic. Shalom, have a great weekend, great Shabbat. That's okay. We're all learning different levels, but we're all kind of new to it, and we'll continue to get better as we help each other. So have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom in advance, and I'll see you guys Monday.